Welcome back to the King Films College Football Playoff predictions and scenarios, and this week we will again be providing you with every team that can still make the college football playoff going into week 12. But before we start with tier 1, I want to emphasize that you guys should subscribe to the channel, as a very small percentage of you guys who watch the videos are subscribed. So make sure that that subscribe button is not red by pressing on it. In addition, be sure to stay tuned for my personal college football playoff predictions at the end of the video. Let's get into it with tier 1. We're going to start with Georgia and Alabama like we did last week, and both of these teams can probably afford a loss with help. Georgia can, if they are able to beat Charleston Southern this week. They probably are a lock, and they probably will still be the number 1 team unless they get blown out in the SEC championship, even with a loss. As for Alabama, it's going to be tougher for them, but at least now that they are guaranteed to make the SEC championship, if they just don't lose 2 games, which we'll get to later, they can probably control their own destiny even with a loss. Moving on to tier number 2, the win-out section, and we've got 3 teams here this week. We had to drop Oklahoma State and Oklahoma down this week just because of the disrespect the committee is giving to the Big 12 overall. But let's go over who's in this tier right now. It is Oregon, who's got obviously the 2 games against Utah, one being on the road, and then they've got the Civil War against Oregon State. Michigan State has the game against Ohio State, and then they have the Big Ten championship, and then Ohio State has the games against both Michigan teams and the Big Ten championship. I think that any team on this slide will be able to control their destiny if they win out, and that is why I have them in tier 2. But let's move on to tier 3, where we have Oklahoma State at number 1 with a 96% chance, and this is the same thing as last week. The percent chance for the first listed percent is the percent chance if they win out and nothing else is given. So if Oklahoma State can win out, that would include 2 probably wins over Oklahoma. It would have a 96% chance to make the playoff. But the scenario they cannot have is the 2 SEC scenario with Oregon and then any of the Big Ten teams, whether that be Michigan State, Ohio State, or Michigan. And speaking of Michigan, they are number 2 in this tier 3 with an 83% chance of making it if they solely win out. But if they can get Michigan State to lose, probably to Ohio State, as they are a plus 20 underdog. Check out the college football locks and predictions for our pick on that game. But if Michigan can get that seemingly likely Michigan State loss in Columbus, 98% chance is their percentage to make the college football playoff, assuming that they can win out. And of course, that would include the game against Ohio State. Third, Oklahoma is still very much in the hunt. I'm not really sure why people are counting them out yet, as they will have a 77% chance to make the playoff if they win out. That would include probably 2 wins over Oklahoma State and of course the win over Iowa State. So those are 3 quality wins, and the scenario similar to Oklahoma State is that they cannot have the 2 SEC with Oregon, and then any combination of the Big Ten cannot make it either. So that is the one scenario. If Georgia is able to win out, the Big 12 will probably get a bid here. But let's move on to tier number 4, and there's just going to be one team here this week. Texas A&M drops out of playoff contention. That's what we're ruling this week with their loss to Ole Miss. So tier 4, which is chaos and win out, includes Cincinnati only. 71% chance to make the playoff if they can win out, and they need the 1 SEC scenario, as you've seen a million times in this video, and then just 2 teams from the Big 10, Big 12, and Pac-12, and same thing as last week, if they can get that Oregon loss, or at this point, maybe a 2-loss Big 12 champion, so Oklahoma and Oklahoma State would split those games, then Cincinnati could make the playoff if they are able to win out. Let's move on to tier number 5, which is going to need a miracle status. And then we've got Wake Forest, at 62%. They need one SEC team and then 2 from the Big 12, Big 10, and Pac-12 combined, and then 0 Cincinnati's. And then for Notre Dame, it's the same thing as last week, 32% chance. They are going to need the above plus no ACC. So in this video, that is only going to be Wake Forest, because we have ruled out Pitt by virtue of their close win against North Carolina. They really needed to blow them out, but to be honest, they really didn't have much of a shot. And we've also ruled out NC State because of their loss to Wake Forest. An additional team who I do not have listed here is Baylor. Their percent chance to make it if they can win out is 46%, so just above Notre Dame. They're going to need the same one SEC scenario. They're probably going to need just the Big 10 to get a team. They're going to need that Oregon loss. No Cincinnati's, no Notre Dame's, although they might be above Notre Dame, but it's impossible to know until that happens. And probably the hardest thing for them is to make the Big 12 championship, just because of all the shenanigans with points scored and whatnot. Their head-to-head games really don't matter against Iowa State and Oklahoma. They should be able to hope that Oklahoma State wins that battle between those teams, but there's no way to surely know. If they can win the Big 12, they'd probably need some serious help, but they are still very much in the playoff chase. And finally, Tier 6, what you've all been waiting for. Which team that is a long shot that nobody is talking about can still make the playoff? And I'm telling you that it is Ole Miss. 10% chance if they just win out, which includes a game over Vanderbilt. That shouldn't be too hard for them. They're going to need Georgia to make the playoff, obviously, but they would have to win against Georgia. We'll get to that in a second. They would need 2 from the Big 12, Big 10, Pac-12, and ACC. This would probably be easiest if there's a 2-loss Big 12 champion, and then you've got maybe a 2-loss Pac-12 champion in Oregon. Then you make the committee decide between all these teams when they're just looking for a team to put in. You need no Cincinnati and no Notre Dame, so both of those would have to suffer a loss. And then you need probably the hardest part, a win out, and then Alabama to lose to Arkansas and Auburn. Now, this isn't actually out of the picture because Arkansas has been playing better as of late. Obviously, they only have the 10% chance to win this week, but I think this could be a game. Louisiana State was able to play with Alabama, so if Arkansas can get it done, then maybe Auburn will be able to as well in that rivalry game. Auburn will not have Bo Nix for the Iron Bowl, so that will hurt Alabama's strength of schedule. But honestly, as we saw in the Georgia State game for Auburn, these backups are pretty good. I think their backup could be better, and I think Auburn could beat Alabama very feasibly here in the final weeks. So let's move on to my personal predictions at this point, and they're going to stay the same as last week. I think Georgia is just the best team in the nation. They will win out. Next, as you can see on the right there, I have Ohio State also winning out. I think they've just proven that they are the best team in the Big 10. As you can see by the monstrous line this week, Michigan State and Michigan really don't have anything on them, at least in Vegas's eyes. Third, I'm going to have Oklahoma State. I think they're a really good football team, and they will deserve to make the playoff after they win out, which I think they will. I have Oregon losing this week to Utah or in the Pac-12 championship or to Oregon State. I think they could lose any of those games, and so I do not have Oregon in the playoff, and as a result, I have the de facto 5th pick in Cincinnati. They just need one thing to go their way, and I have it going for them in the Oregon. I think their schedule is very easy, so I have Cincinnati in the playoff. So there you go. Georgia, Ohio State, Cincinnati, and Oklahoma State. Those are my predictions. Please be sure to comment your predictions below. As I mentioned earlier, be sure to hit that subscribe button, and thank you for watching.